am living the legacy of my name for sure, because I'm traveling all around the world, listening to elders and carrying their messages. So I welcome all of you. The number of people is no matter, because the people who show up are meant to be here. So like Geneva explained, I had a traditional upbringing where the whole village literally raised me. And I had to spend equal time with the men, equal time with the women, equal time with the elders, and equal time with my peers. My job as with my peers is to play. And the adult job is to create the space for people, for children to learn, not tell them what to learn, how to learn, or define anything. So I grew up not asking a single question. I just watched, listen, and learn. And it's a very unique way because it allows you to expand out to the maximum of your capability without the prescription of an adult telling you what you should learn. And so it's quite an amazing way to grow up. And my people, we have stories about our people coming out of Egypt thousands of years ago, going up to outer Siberia, to, outer Mongolia and to Siberia, and then to Kamchatka, and across by boat. We didn't cross the Bering Land Bridge. We were people of the sea, so we came by sea. And we developed, it's very unique, we developed the most densely populated linear mile of shoreline of anybody in North America. We did it in a way that is very spiritual, because one of my elders on St. Paul Island, where I'm born in the middle of the Bering Sea, said, look, even the birds don't worry about where they're going to get their food the next day. Why should we? So we live as a real, what we call a real human being, and most of the indigenous people around the world have a similar kind of saying about being a real human being, which means being present in the moment and in the heart. And that's the way we lived. And we didn't have any food storage technologies except for wind blowing dry, and that was it. And we didn't have footwear even in the wintertime. How in Alaska, that's really something. But we were the only native peoples in Alaska that didn't have footwear. And we developed a highly sophisticated technology, spiritual technology. And I carry that to the present day because, Kuyak is a name given to one person each lifetime by all of my people. And I was given that name at 4 years old by the last Kuyak that was left alive amongst my people. And we had this designation for thousands of years. Now, I am going to be the last Kuyak left alive. When I die, that's going to be it, because we know that either human beings will change their consciousness from the mind to the heart, or we will be gone in my lifetime. So a new Kuyak will not be needed either way. And I was raised in a remarkable way where I was never scolded. How many of you have never been scolded? Raise your hand. Okay. Yeah, I was never scolded. I was always affirmed by every adult in the village. And they would say, Ang Lakaya Kamuda, or Ang Lakaya Hamna Kochtien. And that means good boy. Every single day from age 5 to age 13, I received that kind of affirmation from every adult I would ever encounter at any time. So it was quite a remarkable way. The reason for that is that our people understood that we are spirit beings in human form, and that we must take care of the new spirits that arrive in human form, because we are easily traumatized. And for the world, there is no one alive, I believe, that has not been traumatized. You carry it. Your mother carried the lineage of abuse by the masculine, and download it into you as a fetus. Then you're born a woman, and you experience the things that women have experienced in the imbalance in the world. And this is something that we have forgotten, all the laws for living. Where Yupik elders in Southwest Alaska here, they say that we live in a reverse society, or the inside out society, where we've forgotten the laws for living. And one of the most salient reversals is that now the mind tells the heart what to do, instead of the heart telling the mind what to do. And we see the results of that everywhere in the world now. The results of that this kind of imbalance creates systems and technologies and thinking that is imbalanced without the feminine side. And I learned the feminine side by the time I was 6 years old. The men would take me out hunting with them, and I learned it from men, by the way. And the men would take me out hunting with them. We'd hunt for stellar sea lion. It's not like the California sea lion. It's much bigger. And so we would hunt from shore to water. And I would watch the men as they would sit there hour after hour after hour. And I'm 5 years old now, mind you. And they would just sit there. They wouldn't be very active. They didn't talk very much. And I thought that was a miracle, because by the time, we would go out hunting starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, by noon at 5 years old or 6 years old, I would just get daydreamy and sleepy. But I noticed that the men never got daydreamy or sleepy. And then all of a sudden, one of the hunters might say, "Kawakako, sea lion coming." And we would hunt, mind you, we're on an island, 12 miles long and 5 miles wide, a remarkable place. By the time when I was a child, there were 1.2 million northern fur seals, 2.5 million seabirds, and 400 Unungan people. It was a magical place to be born. And the hunter would say, "Kawakako, sea lion coming," and we have 180 degrees of water on the island, and where the sea lion could pop up anywhere. But yet instantly, all the men at the same time would look at one place in the water, and I would look and I'd look and I'd look, and there's no sea lion. And then pretty soon, maybe 10 minutes later, a sea lion would appear exactly where the men were watching. And I thought, wow, that's really magical. And it's something that I learned at 6 years old. When I would watch seabirds. Now, mind you, 2.5 million seabirds on an island. We have bird cliffs, and the birds come during the summertime to breed, and there would be maybe 10,000 birds underneath one cliff. And you can't imagine what that's like. And I would walk out of the village, about 3 miles away from the village, the nearest bird rookery would be, in the dark, waiting. I wanted to get out there when the birds first would wake up and start stirring. And so I would walk in the pitch black dark. You know, it's 20 days of sunshine a year in the Pribilof Islands. And so there's no light. There weren't any street lights. And I would walk out there by myself underneath the cliff, you know, going across gigantic boulders. Now today that might be considered child abuse, but that was our way during that time. I went out there and I wanted to experience what the seabirds were doing. And because I was fascinated by the fact that they were just alive and they just were there, full of life. And so they would be passing by me, you know, within inches, flying to or from the cliff. And one day at 6 years old, I noted that seabirds were amazing in that they, maybe 10,000 seabirds underneath the bird cliff, and they would never even clip a wing. I said, how did birds do that? And so in my 6-year-old mind, I said, well, what's the difference between human beings and birds? And I thought, well, birds don't think. And they just are. They're a field. I didn't have the words at the time, but they're a field of awareness that was quite beautiful. And so I said, I want to be a bird. I want to feel like a bird. So I worked at not thinking. And I wouldn't think for hours, and I can still do that today. And that's when the magic happened. And I learned that the hunters learned that from the seabirds. When they are present in the moment, in the heart, then the moment is infinite, and your awareness increases manyfold. Most people have never experienced that, where the intelligence is not in the mind, it's in the entire body. And it's seated in the heart. And so I'm out there and I realized that the hunters had learned that when I started doing that, at 6 years old, I went out hunting and I started doing what I learned, and I never got sleepy again. And do you imagine a 5-year-old sitting out for hours and hours, or 6-year-old sitting out for hours and hours, and not saying a word, not doing very much, but looking for a sea lion? Today, it's hard to get the child to sit still for 5 minutes. And so, and then I could feel the sea lion before it came. See, this is not something that's unique to us, but it's something that we forgot. I could feel the sea lion before it came. And I knew exactly where it was, just like the hunters did. And then the hunters would show so the femininity of that is that we have intuition and gut feel and heart sense when we engage the whole body. And so we're there just sitting down, waiting for maybe one sea lion to come by in 8 hours. But it was magical. The best hunters were the people that could carry this kind of thing. And also when they got the sea lion, they would make sure to share it with everybody. And then the hunters themselves would go back and share the sea lion with their extended family and the widows and people who couldn't go out hunting anymore. And so that was a beautiful way to grow up. And but also in contrast to that, I was born a slave. That many people do not hear about this because the US government kept it a secret. I was a slave with all my people at the hands of the US government. We were a captive labor force to kill fur seals for their fur for the government. And, protest was dealt with very harshly. I remember one time when a man got pissed off, this was in the 1950s, he got pissed off at the government agent, said he's not going to take it anymore, and goes down and trashes the government agent's office. And the government agent knew he had to deal with this, otherwise he would have wholesale insurrection. And so he decides, this man had a wife and 5 kids. He decides this man is going to be banished to the end of the island without any water or provisions or anything to kill animals with for food. But the people smuggled a rifle and ammunition and water to him. So he survived. 3 months later, he's repatriated back to the village, and he was told that he's not going to see his family anymore. And his family was taken, his wife and 5 kids, and each one was put into a different house owned by the government. And with orders not to see your family members. And the man was told, okay, you're back, you're alive, but you're never going to see your family again. From that day forward, he drank himself to a stupor, and until he died about 10 years ago. And every member of his family died of alcohol or alcohol-related illnesses. And so that's the kind of system that I was born under. And I lived through that through my early years. And that's when I became, I guess you would call, a rebel. I realized that governments are not necessarily benevolent. And I would question everything that went on. And that's where, I decided to join the patriarchy, and I achieved the pinnacle of the patriarchy where I was Commissioner of Commerce and Economic Development for the state of Alaska. It was a cabinet post. And I was the head, head of 17 boards and councils. I was the vice chair of a $3 billion company. And I did that to learn how the system worked. Then I gave it all up in one day, one single day. I gave it all up. People thought I was crazy. And, because I didn't have a job. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know anything. And one of the most interesting things is I lost all of my so-called friends. And they obviously had friended me because of the power that I had, theoretically power. And so they all disappeared. I realized when I gave that all up that I used them to reflect back to me my value. And when it was all gone, when they were all gone, I was faced with myself. And with no external mirror, I had to look inside. And I just remembered the legacy of my people, which is just live in the moment and in the heart, and the rest will be taken care of. That's why we developed the most densely populated linear mile of shoreline in North America. because we lived that way. And so I thought, well, if my people could do it, I can too. And so that's when I gave up everything. And that's when the magic in my life started to happen, where I ended up in Anchorage. I didn't have any money, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I just didn't worry about it. And sure enough, I get an invitation to go to Canada to visit some friends. They paid my way, and I went to Canmore in Alberta. And while I was there, elders from the Morley Reserve, it's a 4,000-acre reserve from Canada, invited me to come to them. And I thought, well, how'd they know I was there? I didn't know. And so I said, yes, I'll go. And so when they were going to perform a sacred ceremony that they hadn't performed in 150 years. And when I got to the place, it was at a battered women's shelter. There were women and children there. And all the elders had white hair, every single one of them, pure white hair. And all of them wore buckskin. And they were conducting the ceremony where they put 4 sacred pipes together, facing each other. And the thing about it was the smoke didn't go up from the pipes. Smoke went sideways and weaved a single strand that went up. And I thought, whoa, I'm with real elders here. And so I just did my thing where they only spoke their own language. They didn't speak any English. And I just watched, listened, and learned. And in the course of the ceremony, a lead elder spoke up and said, we're speaking English for the benefit of our friend from Alaska. We know why you are here. And I thought I was there because they invited me, but no, they knew different. And they said, you know that we have been praying to the Creator, and we have a message for you to carry. And that message is that we know that people have believed or think that they have lost their spiritual ways. We want you to know that is not true. That has been carried for you in the unseen world, waiting for you to wake up in spirit. And that was the end of his English. And then they continued on with ceremonies that lasted 4 hours. And that in itself was magical to me. And I started to feel it and think about it, and what is it that I could do to get back to my own spirituality. And so I came back to Alaska, back to St. Paul Island. And I thought, well, I'll just make things, traditional things. So I made a kayak. We call it the Nikyak. And it's a one-hole kayak that the hunter uses. And it's quite a remarkable craft. I remember when I finished it, it took me 9 months to finish it. And well, 9 months, that's really appropriate. That's the gestation period for human beings, you know. And so I took it out into the Bering Sea for the first time. And I went near a fur seal rookery, and a surprising thing happened. The fur seal, a young fur seal, jumps on my bow just to be there. And he stayed there for like 15 minutes. And I thought, whoa, this never happened. You know, fur seals are afraid of human beings because we have been killing them for the government for years. We became slaves of the U.S. government in 1867 when the U.S. purchased the jurisdiction of Alaska and then they took us as their wards. And we didn't achieve our political independence until 1966. And we were running on the heels of the Black movement for freedom. And, you know, we, up until that point in time, we didn't own our homes. They weren't called homes, they were called houses. We were rationed our food, clothing, and housing. And they were used strategically by the government agent to control our people, because if you did something that the government agent didn't want, they would say, okay, you're going to be penalized by the fact that you're going to lose food rations. Now, when the government agent gives food rations, he gives it to the whole family. So if you disobey, your family would suffer, or you'd be jailed, or you would be deported off the island without your family. And so it was pretty stiff. And so we complied because of that. But some men got together. The government agent wouldn't allow us to gather in groups. And so the men went to the government agent and said, well, we'd like to create a play for you for the entertainment of all the government agents on the island. And the government agents thought that was a great idea. So the men would get together, and instead of, they would, practice for the play, but their main reason for asking for it was to get together to figure out how to end this government slavery. And what they did was smuggled some letters off the island in 1960, and it was published by the only native newspaper in Alaska at that time, called the Tundra Times. And the letters talked about how we were treated. So it was picked up by the US Human Rights Commission, and they did an investigation. Willard Bowman, he was a black man, was the head of the Human Rights Commission at that time. And they did an investigation and found that it was true. We were slaves. And so the US Human Rights Commission turned that report into the government, to Congress, and Congress conducted its own investigation in 1964 and held hearings on the island where they got testimony from people. And that resulted in our Freedom Bill in 1966. And ironically, it was called the Fur Seal Act of 1966. But in that act, we got our houses. The individuals that were in the houses got their houses, and the government plans for dislocating our people and penalizing them ceased. And we could vote in US elections. Prior to that time, we could not vote in state elections or federal elections. And people could leave, or they couldn't leave the island without the government's permission, and no one was allowed without government permission. And so that's the kind of thing that I grew up with that told me that you should question everything. And now, mind you, I didn't come out with a chip on my shoulder, because the elders, through their behavior, through their language, through what they said, never showed any anger or hatred towards anybody. And they said, if you have anger or revenge or something like that in your mind, you're going to hurt yourself and hurt your people, not have success in what you are doing. And so that's the kind of thing that I grew up with, was kindness and compassion and love for everybody. That's why we say Angwan, hello everyone, hello my other self. And so I looked at, one of the things that I questioned was religion. And I looked at religion, and I would want to go deep into it, find out how it started, and what it did. And it was interesting to note, what I thought was that the Christianity had grafted Wiccan religious symbolism into their own creation. So for example, the cauldron that they used, I found out that the church officials said, okay, let's take that and let's change it so that it now becomes a cup instead of a cauldron. So they changed it enough to make a difference so that people would not suspect. And so here we are with the cauldron. Then you talk about, I mean, we consider Jesus Christ to be a universal enlightened master. He had mastered all the different religions around the world. This is what I found, that he did his work in the missing years of his life until 33, when he would go around the world and master the teachings that were given at that time. And you ask where the teachings are. In Emperor Constantine, in his years, called together a council, an ecumenical council. And that council deliberately extricated all the teachings that Jesus made about feminine, about the importance of the feminine. And, that was quite consistent with my people's stories, where we had been living in a world that had masculine imbalance and feminine imbalance. It's like a pendulum swinging back and forth since the beginning of time. And we call it the beginning of time because when we live in the infinite moment, there is no time. But when we left our hearts, we fell into disassociation with ourselves. And so when I'm separated from myself, it's easy for me to separate from others. And it's easy to violate the rights and being of other people. And this separation results in wars and all the other things that you know about that traumatizes the human soul. And so I was studying these things and questioning everything, including even our buildings. Like the apartment here I'm living in is square shaped inside. Before, like most indigenous people, we would do things in circles. And a circle is symbolic of many different things, one of which is we are all equal. There's no one any better or any less than another. So when we conduct talking circles, it's a circle. And with the principle that no one is better or worse than another. And so I look at the building and it's square and mostly, and then I look at missiles, that's a gigantic phallic symbol. And it's imbalanced because it lacks the feminine. And I look at state-of-the-art technology, where even today we think that hybrid fuel is a good thing because it'll lessen the CO2 emissions. But when you really examine it, for example, when the US decided to go to hybrid fuels, then many of the world's farmers, instead of food production, they went to fuel production. And many farmers did around the world. And that increased the price of food and increased starvation in the world. And we think it's a good idea. You talk about the exotic batteries that are put into these hybrid cars, and it contains exotic minerals. What are we going to do with these batteries when their life is gone? Are we going to recycle them like we recycle our computers? And we think that we're recycling them, but most of what is left of the computer is sent to poor countries, and the poor people pick apart these computer components to take out the precious metal for money, and they poison themselves and poison the earth. I mean, you look at anything that is born. In fact, what our people say is that nothing new is going to be created because they're all regurgitation of the old in new form. And so we don't recognize that pattern. And they also say that women are going to lead the way for the new world, if you will. We have stories about 4 worlds. We're in the 4th world now. We're transitioning to the 5th world. And whether or not we transition successfully, I was with Don Alejandro, who was keeper of the day calendar for the Mayan people. We spent a week together sharing stories. And he said, we're going to have some hard times coming. Everybody in the world. And the ones that will negotiate the best are going to be people of the fire, which means people of the heart. And so this pandemic that shows up is not an accident. Many, many indigenous people knew that this time was coming. And it's Mother Earth herself that is giving us these messages. And one of the things that it does is slow everything down around the world, to the point that the ozone layer off of the north, the Arctic, has completely healed. And animals are showing up where humans used to be, because they have a collective intelligence around the world that tells them human beings are going to be down here, so they're going to be in their homes, and so we're going to go out and enjoy the things that we couldn't enjoy while they were here. So you'll see animals showing up everywhere. But also that the more we stay disconnected, the more fear that we have. See, guilt, shame, remorse, anger, rage, jealousy, all these things are products of the past that live with us today. Or we're fearful, which is projection into the future. Every place except the proverbial now. And so the elders are saying that the world probably isn't going to learn everything it needs to learn during this time. During this time, we have been given the opportunity to slow down and to be inside physically and inside into our own bodies, and examine, what are we doing? Why is it that there were like thousands of more environmental organizations in existence today than there were 30 years ago? And millions of people of good heart are part of it. But yet life support system of Mother Earth is coming to the edge, and no one asks why. It's something that is been in prophecy, but it's also very predictable, that we have made a mess of things, and we need to pay attention to what we've done. And Mother Earth has sent this virus out as a warning, because she is crying for her children, for her human children and all of her offspring in the world, because human beings have lost their niche. They have lost the place where they live the way a real human being lives. And so the next thing that's going to happen, according to the elders, is that we're going to go to another round of coronavirus. It'll probably be this year. And it's going to be harder than the first one. And if we don't pay attention to that, we're going to get harder lessons yet. And so in all the indigenous people, I work for the wisdom weavers of the world. And for those of you who are interested, it's www.wisdomweavers.world. For our website, you'll find out what we're doing. And we met with elders from throughout the world in Kauai in 2017 with two questions in mind. What is the state of the world as they see it now? And what must we be doing now? And so we produced a 14-minute film that was launched by Reuters on Earth Day with the elder messages. The first shot out of the thing is what the elders wanted their messages heard around the world. And so magically Reuters shows up and says, hey, we'd like to take this message. So we said, okay, that's good. Take it wherever you want. And so it's shown up in New York Times and in all the different medium outlets that Reuters has. And so when I first met with the elders, I said, how much of this can we film? And they said, we don't want anything left out. Time for secrets is done. And we have to show the world the way that it is, the way that real human beings are. And so they said, we want our ceremonies. We did ceremonies every day. We want them totally shown, as well as all of our talks. We don't want anything edited out. And so that's the organization I work with. And then the team that was put together to implement what the elders want, when we got together, I realized they weren't ready. So it took us 2 years of internalized process of getting to the heart before we were ready to activate the Wisdom Weaver Lodge. And now we're called weavers because what we want to do is find people of like-minded heart and organizations of like-minded heart and weave them together in unity, where we share each other's messages around the world that is in like-minded heart, rather than an organization coming up and saying, well, we represent South America. And, you know, that's good that they've done that, but yet what we need is everyone to work together, because the elders say the time of the lone wolf is done. We need each other. And all of you who are here must know that you are given a great gift for this time. God didn't bring you here by accident. That your gift can be found when you go to your heart. And your heart will tell you what your gift is. But it's going to be very challenging for people who are want to follow this, because, you know, what the Maori and Hopi say is let go of the sides of the riverbank, move to the center, find those who have done the same, and celebrate. What that means is letting go of the side of the riverbank is doing what I did, which is to jump from all human attachments. And go to the center means going to your proverbial center, your heart, and the center of the river of life. Because the river of life knows where it's going. We do not. And find those who have done the same is find those who've had the courage, like you, to jump, let go of all these things that we consider to be the way people live. Because the way we live is reverse of the way we live. So I want to leave this more for questions. And Geneva, how much time do we have?
We don't really have a set end time. So, I mean, however long you would like to answer questions for, I think we're open.
Okay.
We'll see how many we get, right?
Yep.
Did you have any additional comments before we go into a Q&A?
Just one thing. Women are going to take the lead during this time because we still have the old. We still have to create the new. We're in between. So we are the ones to determine the way that it's going to go. And women were considered at one time in human history as sacred. Every single woman was considered sacred. And we have forgotten why. And what my people say in their stories is that there is a womb at the center of the universe. That's where we get our original instructions from. We didn't invent it. We didn't think about it through experience. It was just given to us. And the identical field of energy is in every woman. And when women get together in sisterhood, heal within themselves, then they can project a container. We're energy beings. We can project a container of this energy outside of their bodies. Only then will something new be created. Until that happens, nothing new is going to be created.
Larry, thank you so much for your talk and for sharing your wisdom with us. I'd like to open it up to a Q&A. Since we still have a small enough group to do the video, I offer, and please speak. Please feel free to verbally ask your question. You'll just need to unmute yourself. Does anyone have any questions for Larry? Oh, I see someone has raised their hand. That's also a very good way to do it. Cindy?
Thank you so much. I have a question, and gosh, I hope it's related, but I'm seeing all the hospital workers now suffering such great emotional duress, the suicide of the young doctor in New York. I'm wondering if there is a grief ritual or a way that the people that are, this is about the virus, but is there a way that we can sort of keep up with the grief and move it from our bodies, especially those who are steeped in it day in and day out, so that they don't despair?
That's an absolutely excellent question. We live in a society where emotions are not acceptable. What emotions that we have, we've got to hold it in. It's okay for a man or a woman to be angry, for example, but you have a man cry in a meeting, that's a no-no. And for the reporter, you see the reporters, they're very stiff and they're very, they do that and say, oh, blah, 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 blah. They might talk about the war in one time and then something funny in the next moment. And they are just representative of ourselves, our mirrors of ourselves that are outside of us. And the emotions, we're used to just locking it inside of ourselves. And we don't feel free to emote anymore. It's not safe. And so grieving is one of those most important ones, because we have a lot to grieve from our history, from all of our histories. And we don't honor it. I mean, we might cry for what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? People who grieve for weeks sometimes, depending on the size of the grief. The people that I know, the indigenous people, they grieve and they wail. They just put their whole being into the grieving and the wailing. You know, when you watch women in the Middle East, you know, they're really just letting it all out. And, you know, that's the only way that we can do it. So when you ask our elders, what's the purpose of culture? They said the real purpose of culture that many have forgotten is that we keep ourselves as real human beings through our cultural practices. And so they said, you want to learn how to be a real human being. Our teacher, they say, our teacher is a 2-year-old child, because a child has no defenses and have none of the things that we have grew to have as adults. And so when you see a child, maybe they get into a dispute with another child, they're just engaging their whole bodies and they're really angry. And then 2 minutes later, they're playing together again. You know, that's just one of 1,000 examples. I went to a native gathering of 2,000 people in a circle, and in walks a 2-year-old child in the middle of the circle. She was buck naked. She didn't have any of the stuff that we have as adults. And so there are many different ways to grieve, but this I feel that you should know. Grieving isn't just crying for a day. Grieving is engaging your entire body in wailing, in crying, in doing all these kinds of things while you tend to whatever tragically happens to another person. And until we do that, this stuff is going to be piling up on us year after year after year. And how much grief is inside of our people, all people. And in the US, you know, it's like, grieving? What's that?
Thank you, Larry. Does anyone else have any questions? You don't necessarily have to raise your hand. You're welcome to just unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, Christine Staub here, calling from North Carolina. Hi, Ilarion. There is something that you said here, which doesn't surprise me, because we humans, you know, have to be knocked over the head. I don't know how many times, which is the world is probably not going to learn everything it needs to learn during this time. And, you know, even right now on this call, you're kind of, I think, talking to the peanut gallery, those of us who've already seen that the world needs to change. And yet, as we look around, it looks hopeless in a way, because all the polarization in a way is just increasing. And I know a long time ago, I'm going to paraphrase it, you said something to me about there are no guarantees, right? And yet I'm wondering, as the wisdom weavers have been coming together, is there like, can you share anything about a message of, I almost dare say hope, you know, like that if we just keep each single one of us looking for what's mine to do in this moment right now in front of me, no matter how small it is, that in fact, this dream of, you know, turning the boat around or whatever, bringing the world back into balance can manifest. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, it's, you know, they say that we can't offer the world that which we do not have. So if we don't, you know, it's not about loving everybody. It's about becoming love. We cannot just project love and do love and all that kind of stuff. We have to be love. And so, you know, everything that is happening today. So for example, when we trash the environment, we're trashing ourselves inside. When we are angry towards someone else, we're angry at ourselves first. When we criticize another or judge another, we're judging and criticizing ourselves first. And this is something that when you get used to and knowing your heart, it never guides you wrong. Our hearts always are impeccably right. And it's just all this minutia and mess that we've created in our minds that makes us think that, oh, well, I listen to my heart, you know, but really it's the mind talking. And the heart does not have ego. It always expresses love and compassion and all these kinds of things that we strive for, but then we read it and immediately we're in our minds reading, oh, we got to have love and compassion. Okay, I'm going to try to do that. That's the mind talking. And many people cannot tell anymore whether or not it's their heart talking or their mind talking. And you've got to be able to clear out all the stuff that we have gathered in life today, in our experiences with everything, and let it go completely, because we're filled with this stuff. And until you empty out, as the sages have said over the thousands of years, until you empty out, it cannot be replaced with anything. And so it's a message of hope, because I've traveled all over the world and I see that there are many, many, many people that have come to the point of realizing that nothing works anymore. And they are ready for something different. And so when you show up in this gathering here, it's a sign that you know that something different must be done. Well, the thing that should be done starts with yourself, not with anything else. In fact, the elders are saying that, you know, the world is looking in the wrong direction for the answers to their questions. What they're doing, like the environmentalists are working at stopping, say, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline or something else, and what we're energy beings, mentally, physically, and spiritually. When we pour our mental, physical, and spiritual energies in reaction to something that has gone on, it feeds the very thing that you're trying to stop. Instead, they said, we must focus on that which the world that we want, not in reaction to anything. Yes, during this time, there are things that happen that must be stopped. Say, okay, go ahead, work at stopping it, but don't pour your mental, physical, and spiritual energies into that unless you want to continue the problems that we have today. Focus instead on the world you want to see, and the world you want to see cannot be done until you get to your heart. Only your heart knows what should be done, that what you should contribute.
Thank you, Ilarion.
Are there any additional questions?
Hello, Melissa. She's an old friend of mine.
Hi.
How is it going? You disappeared.
What I would like to say to this is during this time of lockdown, I've been reading Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, and also Recovering the Sacred by Winona LaDuke. And there's something that keeps drawing me back to the culture of the indigenous people here in the United States that talk about grieving. I mean, that's all I do while reading this stuff. I don't know how the people endure the history. I just can't not understand how that has happened. And I'm wondering what I can do, how I can contribute to a new world for all of us, because if this doesn't get settled, I don't know. I think it's just terrible. Could you please speak to that, Larry?
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. You know, my people, despite the fact that they evolved this beautiful, beautiful, incredible culture, when the Westerners first arrived, we lost 80% of our population. So like the Jews, we had our own Holocaust. In 50 years, we lost 80% of our population. And then and then we were made slaves, like the Black Americans, like the African Americans. And then we were interned in Southeast Alaska during World War II. We were the only Americans, besides the Japanese, who were citizens, that were imprisoned in camps. And the difference between the Japanese Americans and us was that we lost 10% of our population at the hands of the US government due to malnutrition and disease. And my grandmother died in one of these camps. And they died in 2 years. And so, like the Japanese Americans, we've been interned. Like the Black Americans, we were enslaved. Like the Jews, we had a Holocaust. But yet we're still here. We've been out in Bering Sea for over 10,000 years. And I can, you know, it's a testament to any people that everybody's got that ability if they had the right kind of bringing up. So I had the right kind of bringing up. I had elders who were kind, who were caring, who were compassionate for everything and everyone. And now we're in a situation where that is not true. And what we do with our kids, for example, is we train them from the get-go to give away our personal authority to who? The adults, the parents, first, because the parents are saying, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. Then they go to school and we're looking at you know, all the chairs lined up to face the front to what? To the authority, the teacher. I'm going to teach you this. You have to pay attention. And then you go to all the way up to postdoctorate degree, and anything less is considered inferior. And so this thing trains you to give away what I call your personal authority. And so now we become a people who doesn't have any of their personal authority back, because your personal authority is what comes from the heart. And you're not going to achieve it any other way. I can't see a way to achieve it any way except going to your heart and doing what is necessary, the work that's necessary to drop from your mind to your heart, where the heart tells the mind what to do. And the mind's job is to figure out how to accomplish what your heart is telling you to do.
Thank you.
Larry, were there any other questions or comments?
Hello, can you hear me there?
Hi, Sally.
I don't really have a question.
Your audio is a little
Can you hear me
little bit.
now?
There you go. Now we can hear you.
From the laptop. No, I'm yeah, from Cape. I'm living in Cambridge in the UK. So I just really wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting me join this wonderful group. And Larry, I think I first heard you on the Shift Network, and whatever you're saying just so resonates with me. And a long time ago, I was able to go to Canada, and I've spent a lot of time with Indigenous peoples all over the world. And you are confirming so much that what I need to do and how I can help. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Wow, UK. Thank you so much, Sally. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. It's if it resonates with anyone, then I'm just a reminder. I'm reminding you of something you already know. Good to see you, Melissa.
Sorry, my screen froze for a second there. Does anyone else have any questions or comments before we end the call? No? Last chance?
I'm sure I've given a lot of things to think about, and you know, just sit with it and feel it, and you know, you'll be on your journey.
I think those are wonderful closing words. So if no one else has any questions or comments, then I just want to thank all of you for joining us today from all over the world. And thank you so much to Larry for being here and giving us your time and your wisdom. And I hope that you will continue to follow the Interfaith Center, sign up for our newsletter, and join us at future events that we have going on during the shutdown. And we hope that this helps you to feel a little bit more connected and gives you a little more hope in this very difficult time for all of us. So thank you again. Larry, did you have anything else to add before I sign us off?
Yeah, you know, there are no more gurus in the world, single gurus. We are all gurus. Every single one of us are gurus. And you have a great gift to give to the world. Don't think about what size it is or where you're going to get the money or whatever else. I mean, if you are in your heart and in the present moment, the rest will be taken care of. And that requires a faith that very few people have now. And that's the level of faith that Jesus talked about when he said, this too and many more, or much more you will do. But the only way to do that is to drop into your heart. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Someone asked about a recording. I will post a recording of this later today or early tomorrow on Facebook. I try to send the recordings out in our newsletter. And I can also email it to you. I see I got one email. If anyone would like it emailed directly to them, if you can just put your email address in the chat. And I don't know, is there a way they can contact you, Larry, if they have any additional questions or?
Yeah, you can do that through www.wisdomweavers.world, and it will get to me.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you all for taking time out of your day to, oh, I got a few more emails, spend this time with us. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening or whatever time of day it is in your part of the world. So thank you, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Geneva.
Thanks,
And
Becky.